Hello, so this video is for the juniors. It's for the fourth quiz in Unit 1 about poetry. And this is the second section of Unit 1, and it's about modern poets. And because of World War I and the Great Depression, there was a lot of what was called disillusionment, which means people had expected one thing and for it to be good and great and wonderful, and then it ended up not being. And that's disillusionment, where you get this disappointed feeling in something that you thought would be better. And as a result of that, there was this modernist movement in art and in literature. And modernism is an artistic movement shown by a break with tradition. Before this time, there had been people had written poetry in a certain way, and they started writing it in a different way. They started using innovative rules and coming up with all sorts of new ideas. And innovation means something that's inventive and something that hasn't been done before. I'm going to read to you parts of a reading that you're going to need to do for this, to do this quiz, and it's called "Don't Crowd the Wheelbarrow." Ezra Pound and the Rules of Imagism. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I'm going to read you the 3 basic rules of imagism and a poem. And rule 1 of imagism is direct treatment of the thing, whether subjective or objective. And that means Ezra Pound believed that the poet must observe and comprehend a subject fully, whether a feeling, a thought, or something concrete, and describe it precisely without resorting to vague language or abstractions. And so he wasn't into describing sunsets and being all flowery. He said, this is the thing, I'm going to describe it. And that's imagism. The poet must use concrete images, the things of this world that can be known with the senses, 5 senses, as his tools. Go in fear of abstractions. And abstractions, we've discussed this in class before, but an abstract noun is something that you cannot perceive with any of your 5 senses, something that, like an emotion that exists inside of yourself, you can feel it, like love or hate, but you can't hold it in your hand. And so he said, don't use abstract words. Use what you can perceive with your 5 senses to describe this thing. Those were his rules of imagism. That was a part of what imagism is. Pound writes, because abstractions fall short of conveying truth, a true meaningful experience, and suffocate the images at work. Direct treatment of the thing through use of images created a new experience for the reader, something Pound believed that abstractions such as love, hate, fear, or longing did not. Thus, precise use of imagery goes beyond generally presenting an idea or simply recounting the physical world. As an example, he offers the following: don't use such an expression as dim lands of peace. It dulls the image. It mixes an abstraction with a concrete. It comes from the writers not realizing that the natural object is always the adequate symbol. Rule number 2, to use absolutely no word that does not contribute to the presentation. So no word that doesn't show what you're talking about. Don't get flowery again. Pound writes, it is better to present one image in a lifetime than to produce voluminous works. If this was truly Pound's belief, one can see why he grappled with detesting Whitman, whose cataloging tumbled across the page until it ran out. Imagism was grounded in precision and economy, ideas that became hallmarks of poetry in the modern era. One need only consider some of the touchstone poems of imagism, such as William's 16-word The Red Wheelbarrow, or Pound's own 14-word In a Station of the Metro. To see these tenets played out on the page, or all aspects of the poem work to highlight one or two central images. Now I'm going to skip down to rule number 3. As regarding rhythm, he composed in the sequence of the musical phrase, as regarding rhythm, to compose in the sequence of the musical phrase, not in sequence of a metronome. A metronome, just to give you reference, is a thing that some people put on their pianos. It's kind of shaped like this, and it's got a little tick-tock that goes tick, 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 and it helps the piano player stay in rhythm. And he's saying, use words that are natural, not words that sound like a tick, 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 tick. And so that's what he's saying. So anyway, his specific focus is sound, and like natural sound. And now I'm going to read to you this poem called A Pact by Ezra Pound, addressing Walt Whitman. Because Walt Whitman wrote in flowery language that Pound didn't like, but he kind of got the ideas he didn't completely hate Walt Whitman. And so he's trying to find balance here. A Pact by Ezra Pound. I make a pact with you, Walt Whitman. I have detested you long enough. I come to you as a grown child who has had a pig-headed father. I am old enough now to make friends. It was you that broke the new wood. Now is a time for carving. We have one sap and one root. Let there be commerce between us. Okay, so in modernism, let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to remember who wrote. Okay, so Robert Frost was also a poet who wrote modernist poetry. And he wrote in, he often wrote in iambic meter, which is, so iambic meter is where there is a soft syllable followed by a hard syllable. So this is an example, this is iambic meter. And the little scoop that looks like a U is a soft, and then the tick at the top is a hard. And a lot of poetry was, before modernism started, was written in iambic meter or iambic pentameter, which was a line of 5 iambic meters or 10 syllables. But he wrote, even though he used a rhythm that was traditional, his ideas were more related to modernism. And so anyway, modernism, like I think I said already, was an artistic movement that was shown by a break with tradition, poems that had come before. And modernism was where you describe simple images and use precise and clear language. And like I said already, there were the 3 rules of imagism, or modernism, that led to imagism. And that was describe the subject directly, which I talked about already. The second rule, which was don't use any words that you don't need, no flowery, floofy stuff. And 3, make it sound natural. Don't make it sound like a ticking metronome. And imagists wrote using as few words as possible to describe something. And hopefully I'm not being too confusing. Modernism led to imagism. And so they kind of were related to each other. Modernism came first, followed by imagism later on. And then as far as poetry goes, there is what are called end-stopped lines and enjambment lines. And I'm talking about this because that's, I believe, going to be in the quiz. An end-stop line is where the line ends with like a period or some other punctuation that shows that it would end there even if it was a prose. And enjambment is where you're going along, you're reading the line, and then the line stops and then flows, the sentence continues in the line below it. And that's enjambment. And in poetry, in prose, in prose, if you're writing a story, it doesn't really matter where a line ends and then continues on the line below, just wherever the line stops and continues. But in poetry, the way a poem looks is often very important, and where you end a line is on purpose. And so enjambment is a line that flows down to the next line without punctuation. The tone is the author's attitude, about the subject he's writing about or she is writing about. And then the theme is the author's message about the topic that they're writing about. I'm going to show to you a poem that is that's in that I think is in the quiz, but anyway, it's something important that that you'll need to know in order to do well in the quiz. Okay. Now this is from a longer poem. It's not the entire poem, it's from the poem called The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Or The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. And I'm going to show it to you now. Okay, so can you see, sorry. So, and I'll read it here. It's from The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. And that's the first little bit of The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. And you can see right here, this is an entire sentence here. And T.S. Eliot specifically chose to end these lines here, here, and here. It wasn't an accident. This line, and this line are examples of enjambment, and this is an example of an end-stop line. So hopefully that will help you with the fourth quiz of Unit 1, which is 1.2.3, where we've left the Grapes of Wrath, and now we're talking about poets and modernism and imagism and the attitudes and things that were attitudes and ways of writing and creating art that were influenced by these unfortunate things that happened at the beginning of the 20th century. Again, tone is the author's attitude about the subject, and the theme is the author's message about the topic. Theme often can be defined in one word, like love or hate, but is often described in a sentence, which is the author's take on that particular topic. And hopefully that will help you juniors with your fourth quiz on Unit 1.